He's very cut. He's very shredded. He works out, and this guy's in great shape. But he had a significant amount of visceral fat inside of him. You can actually look good from the outside and be bad on the inside. And we call those people TOFIs, thin outside and fat inside.
All right, guys, you got Dr. Sean O'Mara here today, and we're going to talk about visceral fat today, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We're going to talk about visceral fat and other forms of damaging, inflammatory, even deadly fat inside the body. And hopefully we will explore inside your body, Sean, and see what's going on.
You had me do a scan last night, so we'll see the results.
So big thanks. I really appreciate first the opportunity to come and share this information and your willingness to do it. You got a great show, a great channel, what you're doing. And the fact that you're willing to share this kind of information with other people means authentically you care about your followers. So I'm excited about hearing the changes that have taken place already in your life. And having the scan last night, I think, are going to give you some really interesting insights about what you've done and where you're going to be going. So big advantage to you. And I sincerely appreciate the effort that you went to go scanning it, almost 10 o'clock at night to make that happen the night before we do the show. So just super impressed with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Let's dive into this.
All right. So what we're going to do is we, for the sake of your audience and your followers, we did a scan on your abdomen last night. So it's an MRI scan. There was no contrast. We put you into a MRI machine, and then we obtained several slices through your abdomen, what's called the transverse plane. So this is depicted in this image here. And it creates an image at the bottom here in white and black and shades of it. So kind of gray, white, and black. And the first thing to know when it comes to an MRI scan, when you're looking at a scan, is fat is white. And then muscle, bone, and organs, such as your colon, your intestine, they're all black. So in this particular image here, which is the actual first scan of a researcher who's now a friend of mine, Dr. Zhang, who was the first one who told me about this dangerous fat inside the human body called visceral fat, which if you're listening for the first time, you may not know anything about visceral fat, and it's okay because your doctor doesn't know anything about it. I'm an MD, and it's not taught to us in medical school, but if you jump on Google and you jump on ChatGPT and you start looking at the research, you'll wonder why it's not taught. So we'll get into this, and we're going to show an example, a bad example of an abdomen that's filled with visceral fat. So in this image, Sean, before we open up yours, I thought it'd be useful for the sake of your followers to understand, what is an example of a bad amount of visceral fat. There's no good amount of visceral fat. If it's present, it's not good. I suppose the good amount would be 0, and you want to work towards eliminating it completely. So in this case, this guy has a huge amount of visceral fat inside of him, and his muscles on the side, those black objects on the side of his abdomen, are his oblique muscles, and those white streaks in the middle of those oblique muscles are in fact fat that's invading and beginning to replace his muscles. And then the muscles at the bottom of that image, as you go through a scanner like you did last night, you laid on your back, your belly button was pointing towards the ceiling, and the muscles you're laying on your back are called the erectospinal muscles, and you can see from that image that there's a bunch of white already invading those important back muscles. So this guy's in a lot of trouble. He's got an elevated amount of fat in his muscle. He's got an elevated amount of fat in his abdomen, visceral fat. And then his love handles, which are those large area of white in the corners, reflect that he's got an excessive amount of subcutaneous fat. And not all fat is the same, especially deep subcutaneous fat. There's two different compartments to subcutaneous fat. One is protective and keeps you from getting disease, actually prevents heart attacks and strokes and cancer, and believe it or not, prevents obesity. So there's a type of fat that prevents you from having obesity, and that's called superficial subcutaneous fat. from
As a B2B marketer, you know how noisy the ad space can be. If your message isn't targeted to the right audience, it just disappears into the noise. With LinkedIn ads, you could precisely reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant with LinkedIn targeting capabilities. You can reach them by job title, industry, company, and more. Stand out with LinkedIn ads and start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. LinkedIn ads allows you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. You'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers. 1 billion members are on their platform, 180 million senior level executives, and 10 million C-level executives. You'll be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B in technology. LinkedIn generated 2 to 5x higher return on ad spend than any other social media platform, and you'll work with a partner who respects the B2B world you operate in. 79% of B2B content marketers said LinkedIn produces the best results for paid media. LinkedIn has been a great platform for me to also find interesting podcast guests. If you're interested, start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/social to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/social. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
a molecule. And if you're listening today, you should write this down. Adiponectin, adiponectin. Now, the pharmaceutical industry, big insurance, the healthcare industry, and anybody that profits from the fact that you start falling apart with disease does not want you to know about either visceral fat or adiponectin. So visceral fat is bad, adiponectin is good, and adiponectin comes from superficial subcutaneous fats, that little bit of fat on the superficial layer, just underneath that, before that black membrane called scarpus fascia. And this large area here is deep subcutaneous fat, and we'll look at yours, Sean, in just a little bit. But let's look at a couple examples to compare and contrast. Okay, so this image on the bottom, you see mostly white. So when it comes to an abdominal MR scan, you want to be mostly dark and not mostly white. So if you got a lot of white on the inside, you got a lot of that inflammatory fat. And the problem with this fat, Sean, is it causes inflammatory molecules to be released 24 hours a day, trickling through your beautiful body, causing it to fall apart. And so it's very inflammatory. Now, this guy in the image at the top is mostly dark, but he's still got a significant amount of white in the middle of his abdomen. It's oval shape, and all that white surrounding his organs is visceral fat. But the surprising thing is that he had that visceral fat inside when he has a body like this. So he's very cut. He's very shredded. He works out. He's a friend of mine in the Army National Guard named Gabe, and this guy's in great shape, but he had a significant amount of visceral fat inside of him. So you can actually look good from the outside and be bad on the inside. And we call those people TOFIs, thin outside and fat inside. So here's another example before we open up your scans of somebody else who's in great shape. They're mostly dark. They have almost no visceral fat. In fact, after seeing hundreds of thousands of abdominal MRI scans and CT scans, abdominal CT scans, this female, has the lowest amount of visceral fat I've ever seen in a woman, in a female. So she's almost all entirely dark. But let's look at her photograph. So you can follow this individual on Instagram. Her name is Carolyn LaBoucherie, and Carolyn's in Dubai, and she's a model. And for a reason, she's an attractive, very healthy woman. She's got attractive, healthy legs. She's got a very fit figure, her torso. Her arms are very shapely and elegant. She has a very attractive face. She does modeling. She does a lot of modeling, and lots of people follow her all over the world, and really thick, gorgeous hair. Now, the interesting thing is Carolyn is 59 years old. So very surprising how attractive she looks. And here's the take-home lesson from a researcher that's been committed to studying the elimination of chronic disease throughout the remainder of my life. Carolyn looks this good because not because she doesn't have visceral fat inside of her. It's because she never had visceral fat inside of her. Carolyn ate a very low carbohydrate diet and maintained a good lifestyle. So to cut to the chase, she is that pretty girl that has always been in the class, that has always been pretty, and now she's the pretty 59-year-old because she has kept away from processed foods and carbohydrates and has never had a period of obesity or weight gain. She has just been metabolically healthy. So this MRI scan really represents what you want to see inside of you, mostly black and almost no white. So couple last examples before you open up yours, Sean. This image in the top is a very bad abdominal scan, lots of white inside their abdomen, lots of white inside their muscles, and very large love handles. And so if you can't afford an MRI, kind of a poor person's MRI scan is revealed by your love handles. If you got love handles, the chances are that you may have substantial amount of visceral fat. So the love handle can give you kind of a proxy for visceral fat if you can't get to an MRI scanner, either because where you're at or you simply cannot afford anywhere from $250 to sometimes a very expensive one would be about $1,000 to get these MRI scans. But the individual on the bottom is the best MRI scan I've ever seen, and this is a male. And they just have a teeny bit of visceral fat. And look at their enormous, dark, pure, kind of tenderloin-looking muscles there, Sean. Just very, very dark and very big. This is their vertebral body. And these two circles here that look kind of like, jokingly say, look like birch trees were surgically transplanted inside of his abdomen. Those are his core. And he's an Olympic sprinter. So if you look at his legs, they're very lean. They have hardly any fat in them whatsoever, just like his musculature in his abdomen. But in the individual above, with the huge amount of visceral fat, look at all the infiltrating fat in their legs. So I'm very sorry that I wasn't able to get your legs scanned last night, but maybe we can do a repeat scan on your legs and see how your legs look. But for the sake of the audience, we'll at least pique their interest to wonder what Sean Michael Kelly's legs would look like were they to be scanned, and they really correspond to the amount of visceral fat that you have inside of you. So you when it comes to fat inside your muscle, you don't want to look like a marbleized steak, and that's what happens to humans as well as happens to steak. And it happens to these cows when they're fed carbohydrates and grains and corn and soy. And now they're even feeding cattle in their grain and their feed Skittles. Skittles was found in a truck that overturned on a highway.
Oh my God.
Filled, in the middle of the grain and the feed were human candy. So I want you to think about that. They're feeding human candy to cows to get them to have muscle like this. Does that give you a moment's pause about this candy and the sugar and the carbohydrates you're eating? It really should. So, because if you keep having muscles that fall apart, you're not going to be able to stand up straight. Your muscles are going to shrivel up. You're going to lose your beneficial, protective, superficial subcutaneous fat. You'll become skin and bones. And this is the appearance of an aged person, but this is really the appearance of a diseased person. When you age, you should look better. You should actually live better. You should be making more informed choices, and you can improve your appearance. So one last example, here's an individual here, big belly, individual now 3 months later, flat.
Wow.
And that was just 3 months, working to eliminate their visceral fat. But show you an example of what happens on the inside in that 3 months. This is their baseline, which is similar to a scan that we're going to get into very soon now with yours. They're filled with visceral fat on their initial scan. And then this scan here is their heart. So they've got a big chunk of fat, highly inflammatory fat around their heart in the middle of their lungs. And in just a month and a half, substantial reduction in both their visceral fats and their heart fat. and then substantial reduction even more in their visceral fat and heart fat over those 3 months. So the interesting thing is when you utilize an MRI in this manner to optimize your health, you actually improve your health instead of just looking at, do I need surgery? Do I need to have a knee replacement? Do I need to have an ACL tear? Use an MRI to see how awesome am I living my life? Am I kicking the can down the road where I have disease that is continuing to accumulate inside my body? So let's take a look at your scans, okay? So here you are, Sean, and this is your scan last night, and this I was very surprised when I saw inside of you. I thought you would have visceral fat, but I'll look in your eye and say, Sean, you got more visceral fat than what I thought you really would have. So all that white inside of your abdomen is visceral fat, and you're only 27, and so it's causing your sagittal abdominal diameter to be enhanced. So there you are laying down, and you have a kind of a mountain effect. Your visceral fat is displacing your abdomen up, and were we to take your shirt off, you'd have a little bit of a bulge starting. Now we're going to turn it around for you because I know you're a motivated guy, so that will get corrected. But you do not want to be the 35-year-old or the 30-year-old with a dad bod, and we're going to turn that around. And if you got a dad bod, let me just cut to the chase. Your butt is getting flat. You get a dad bod, you might think it's cute. You might think you look like some kind of a tough guy with your belly sticking out. I want you to turn around and get a picture of your backside, your butt. It's flat and it looks like grandpa. That's what's happening to you. So that dad bod is nothing more than visceral fat destroying through inflammation your beautiful musculature. So there you are, Sean, with that elevated amount of visceral fat. Now I'm comparing you to my assistant, John. John is 25, so he's a couple years younger than you. But John is mostly dark inside. He does not have as much visceral fat as you. And we talked a little bit about your carbohydrates that you have been eating for 20 years or so. And it's fairly common in the American diet. But as you cut out those carbohydrates, we saw in 6,000 people that we scanned and followed for the National Science Foundation in our research, the elimination of this dangerous visceral fat by eliminating carbohydrates. So the other thing to point out, Sean, is that scarpus fascia that you have, that black line dividing your subcutaneous fat into deep subcutaneous fat and superficial. The superficial is good. So yeah, man, high five to you. Yeah. You got some nice superficial subcutaneous fat. What does that mean? Is you got the benefit of protective adiponectin going for you. And so that will help you, believe it or not, in having a heart attack, stroke, diabetes, and even obesity. But that other area, however, is counterproductive. So it's the yin yang. This is the bad one, and it's very much like your visceral fat, and they always go together. So I call visceral fat and muscle fat, these white streaks going on in your muscles already, in your rectae spinae muscles, the three black-hatted horsemen. They got black hats, they're bad guys, but the mere presence of them, just that fat inside of you, is not the harm. I could open up my abdomen, dump all your visceral fat inside, and I'd still look the same. But eventually, over a period of time, those inflammatory molecules start getting secreted, and then they'll cause my body to fall apart. And so it's not the presence of these horsemen in your life, it's their guns, okay? So they got these guns, and they're shooting micro doses of these inflammatory molecules that's allowed to accumulate over a period of decades. This is 20 years of Sean Michael Kelly eating carbohydrates and maybe stress, stress and the accumulation of visceral fat over a period of time. But look at compared to this 25-year-old John. Let's look at your scan now compared to my scan. Okay, so this is now 60. I'm 61. This is me 60. 60-year-old Dr. Sean O'Mara. So I'm mostly dark, and my muscles are free of fat, and I have a little bit of visceral fat, but not nearly as much as 27-year-old Sean Michael Kelly. But listen, we can kind of laugh and joke about this a little bit, because you know why? I know after talking to your assistant Bridger, that you're basically a bad. You're going to turn yourself around.
I am.
You're seeing this, and it's engaging you viscerally. It's drawing up something inside of your willpower and your conviction that this may be me, but it's not me in the future, because this is going to change. And that's what you have to happen. You have to get that kind of insight. And so your reaction is the reaction of many people. The many people that we scan, they end up seeing themselves, and they get very motivated. So the last scan we did of you was a scan of your heart. Okay, so this is your right lung and your left lung, and in the middle of your lung, in the middle of your chest, Sean, is your heart. So surrounding your heart is this thick area of inflammatory, ectopic, cardiac heart fat that's buttressing up against all your beautiful coronary arteries that supply blood to your heart and contribute to atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease and any future heart disease, coronary arterial disease that you might have down the road because of that that fat forming around your heart that's allowed to accumulate that nobody tells you about. Now, you learned about the age of 27, well in advance of you hopefully having any heart attacks. But here is your ideal. Okay, above is 60-year-old Sean, Dr. Sean O'Mara, and look at my heart. I got no fat around my heart. But, I better not, because this is my life passion. This is what I do. I specialize in getting rid of fat around the heart and fat within the abdomen and fat within the muscle. So, but I like to show off my example, not to show off, but to hold it out and let people know that you can be a guy in your 60s and 70s and even 80s and not have visceral fat around the heart. In fact, one of the lowest amount of visceral fat I've ever seen in my clients was one of my clients who was 84, and he was reversing all his chronic disease. He had no visceral fat anymore. He would come over to my house and sprint with me at the age of 84. And now I tell my clients, you're not going to die from chronic disease. You're likely to die from an accident. And that's what killed this poor guy, a car accident, 84. Can you imagine?
You jinxed
it. Yeah. So, be careful. You get rid of your visceral fat. You're not going to die from disease. Your body, Sean, is your most important physical asset. So getting these insights, nothing else, not your bank account, not your investment portfolio, not your, I have one guy, I asked him, what's your most important asset? And he said it was my laptop. And I thought, oh my God. And he was serious. So, your body is your most important physical asset, because nothing else is going to influence how much you're going to enjoy or suffer the circumstance you face in the future. So those are kind of examples of heart fat and your scans and your visceral fat. And the last picture I'll show is just my facial photographs, how much I have changed over the past approximately 14 years since I got rid of my own visceral fat. So my image on the left is me with a big inflamed face with a lot of, and actually when we scan people, Sean, now we're scanning down from the brain through people's faces, we can see fat depots, these areas of fat in the face, and it's inflammatory.
Wow.
And so your face, I'm going to call it, you watch everybody who's following Sean, his face is going to change, and he'll put his photographs up as he optimizes himself and optimizes his body. His face will change just like mine did over this period of time. In fact, yours will change faster because you're younger. And I also think you're really motivated. I was just kind of fooling around here. But now, after 7-8 years, I got super, insightful about these changes and what was really happening. So now this is my passion. And I absolutely live to help solve the world's biggest problem, which is chronic disease. Nothing costs us more money. Nothing do we spend more money on. Nothing reduces human productivity more, degrading the performance of athletes or employees in companies. And nothing impairs the quality of lives of people more than chronic disease. And nothing kills more human beings than chronic disease. And I want you to hang on that if you're listening. Why isn't anybody talking about it? And my answer is because people don't have solutions. The system doesn't have an answer to how to get rid of chronic disease, but it in fact exists. It's like making better choices about what you eat, better choices in how you exercise, and how you're really living, that you can eliminate chronic disease. So I'm excited to follow you and see what you're going to do with this. And we'll repeat your scans, and your followers, I think, are going to find it very fascinating how much you're going to change.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because my followers, I mean, just appearance-wise, probably think I'm super healthy, with how I look. I'm not overweight.
No.
I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs. So to see these results is really eye-opening for me, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's all from diet and probably stress and sleep.
Yeah. Well, kudos for you, that you got interested in this subject for yourself on a personal level. And now you're doing something about it. The fact that you reached out to me and wanted me to come on your show. And we came up with this idea about scanning you. And so now you have these valuable metrics to follow. And you're going to separate yourself from all your friends and your contemporaries. You're just going to take off. You're going to start improving ways faster than other people that aren't going to do the same thing. And by the time you're my age, you're going to look like a freak. I mean, you're going to be this super awesome human being at the age of 61. And I really think our ancestors in the past really were superhumans. Probably 20,000 years ago, the appearance of a Homo sapien was extraordinarily different than they are today because of chronic disease. And so, it'll be very interesting to see what you do with this.
And I think it's important because we were talking about the average age of your clients, and it was in the 50s, right?
Right.
So I think people should be aware of this earlier.
I agree. And, your audience is a lot younger. So it's important to, I think, to make that point. In fact, I'll just turn back to this one photograph here. So this is a photograph. This is these are guys in their 20s. Okay, I've given talks all over the world, and I'm 61.
Are you interested in coming on the Digital Social Hour podcast as a guest? Well, click the application link below in the description of this video. We are always looking for cool stories, cool entrepreneurs to talk to about business and life. Click the application link below, and here's the episode, guys.
And I go and give this talk to this group of students down at Texas A&M. They're in their 20s. It's called One Army. Very interesting student group down there. Shout out to them. And so when I'm invited to give this talk on biological optimization, getting really healthy, my son was there and he was a little nervous. He's in the group. He's about his dad coming to talk with all his buds around, right? And so I give this talk, and it's basically the same talk that I've given throughout, many different venues. But I made a couple points. And one was, I said to these young men, I said, look, people are telling you in college to get educated and to make money and, prepare yourself to be successful in your career. And many people do that. Quite a few never get that. They work hard and they get into their retirement age and they can't even support themselves, and they're dependent on Social Security. But what you want to do, and I said to these guys, is you want to make enough money. And as a biological optimized physician, I call it honey. You have got to have skill sets, Sean, how to hunt and bring home the meat for your family. You got to be able to supply that. So I gave that message to those young men. You got to be successful. You got to learn how to go out and make an earning. And lots of people will tell you that. But the other thing they're not telling you is that you got to optimize your health along the way, because most people, Sean, make it to their 60s and they've lost their health.
Right.
So maybe they've made it and they're multimillionaires. Maybe they're even a billionaire. But at that point, they've lost their health in most cases. And so what you want to do all along, if you're following, Sean, you're part of his followers, is you want to be optimizing your wealth and you want to be optimizing your health all along. So by the time you reach, that age of retirement, you've amassed financial independence, but you've also secured your health so you can enjoy that lifestyle instead of maybe dropping dead of a heart attack and somebody else gets to spend your money, or you get cancer, or you just get chronically infirmed and you're in a wheelchair,
right,
or you're using a walker. So really think about that. If you're in your 20s, you want to be investing in optimizing your wealth along the way and optimizing your health. And these guys, when I finished that talk, stood up and gave me the loudest standing ovation I've ever had or I've ever really seen.
Wow.
So, and I really think it came down to the fact that I shared that extra insight. So I wanted to make that point to your followers, because your followers are basically in the same kind of demographics, even though they're young and they got bright eyes ahead of them. They still haven't heard that one point. You want to be optimizing your health.
Health span versus lifespan, right? You
Exactly.
want to align those numbers.
Exactly.
Because you see a lot of people retire in their 60s and they're shot. I mean, they're done.
They are. It's super, super sad. And I see them. They come into, before I got into being a health and performance optimizing physician, I was an ER physician. So we'd see, guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s coming in with deteriorating health. And by the time they're in their 70s and 80s, really bad shape. And I'll just cut to the chase. What's so different about you? You think you're not going to be like the rest of these 70, 80-year-olds? They come into the ER and they'd be laying on the bed and they'd say, "Doctor, if I could just have a bowel movement." They literally have fallen apart in their health that they can't even defecate anymore because their body is so depleted.
Jeez.
So you do not want that to happen. You want your muscles to be highly functional and free of infiltrating fat and free of chronic disease. So you're 90 years old, you're 100 years old, you're taking care of your bodily function. You're not needing a cane, you're not needing a walker, and you definitely don't need a wheelchair. And you get up and out of a chair without any assistance. And so it's a super sad situation when people just follow the tide. The masses of people are being just dragged out into the ocean of chronic disease. And they don't even really notice it because the tide just carries them out with the masses of people.
Yeah.
And but there's a remnant, and you just join the remnant. We're swimming out of that riptide, okay? We're going to swim parallel to the beach. And on the beach, I'd like to say it is this fantastic, luau. We're having this great cookout. There's a nice campfire, and there's a remnant up there that's enjoying life, optimizing and preserving our health. So do not follow the masses of people that are eating tasty food and pleasurable food that are lazy. They're not exercising correctly. They're not living correctly, and then just allowing themselves to fall apart.
Yeah. Okay. So, doctor, you've seen over 10,000 scans, MRI scans. What percentage of them had visceral fat at high levels?
Well, that's a great question. So, first of all, every scan I've seen always has at least a small amount of visceral fat. And then some people, another way to address that question is, some people say, well, how much visceral fat do you want to have? You want to have none. But I would say the majority of people, when I say the majority of people, I would say around 80% have elevated amounts, 80 to 90% will have elevated amounts of visceral fat. In fact, by one chief of radiology who's now reading visceral fat, she estimates in her hospital from her scans, 90 to 95% of the scans she sees on a daily basis have elevated amounts of visceral fat. So it's a huge problem. People are not aware of, and scans might be done for, a variety of reasons. And unfortunately, because visceral fat is not taught in medical schools, nor is it taught in radiology, or I should say graduate residency programs, which are the postgraduate training programs for physicians. Once they finish medical school, they start specializing in a particular area, like radiologists will specialize in MRIs and CT scan interpretation. Those residency programs, just like medical school, are silent when it comes to visceral fat, muscle fat, deep subcutaneous fat, and heart fat. It's the saddest thing. And in fact, there was an extraordinary conversation I had with a cardiothoracic heart surgeon who would carve through tens of thousands of hearts, cutting through the fat around the heart and to transplant, coronary arteries. And I asked him, well, didn't you notice the amount of fat corresponded to the amount of disease in those arteries? And there was this very long pause. And he said, Sean, I actually never paid attention. So that, I know.
Wow.
That is the enormity of this problem, that we are not taught about it, so we don't pay attention to it. And that has got to change, Sean.
Yeah.
We have got to start training doctors in medical schools. And if you're listening today, go and have that conversation. Look at your doctor and say, what can I do to get rid of visceral fat? And watch the awkward expression come over their face, because they won't even know. In fact, you could go and you could pull up a scan like this and you could say, hey, this abdominal scan, can you show me where visceral fat is in here? They won't be able to show it. It's the largest part of that abdomen, and they won't be able to show it because it's just not taught. I'm serious as can be. It's not taught in medical school. So that's what we got to do. We got to start training doctors about what really matters. And, what doesn't matter is cholesterol. I'll just come out and say, I think cholesterol is a huge distractor in the face of what really matters, which is this inflammatory and fat that's killing people in a direct proportional amount to how much they have. And but if Big Pharma can teach physicians to be distracted, to talk about and dominate conversations with patients in the office about cholesterol, just so that they never hear about visceral fat, that's exactly what's going on. So you dominate the conversation. Let me tell you something. You're a patient. That doctor works for you. You're their boss, and you need to go to them and say, help me become more healthy. I don't want to be taking medicine. I want you, doctor, to tell me how to get healthy. That's how the dialogue works. Right. And that's how we need to change things. And right now we have pedantic, arrogant physicians that are self-confident, that are basically chasing disease and profiting from disease instead of allowing people to get better.
Right.
And so ask yourself, your parents, your grandparents, how are they doing going to those doctors? Well, I'll tell you, more medicine, more disease. They're falling apart. Now, you teach them about visceral fat and you start eliminating it, then those medicines will go away. Their disease will go away. But it has to get into medical schools, and it's time we change the educational system in the United States and around the world, because the United States medical system, the curriculum in medical schools is modeled all over the world, and they simply follow what's taught in American medical schools.
I didn't know that.
It is. And if you look at that curriculum, it's a black box. If you're a congressman and you're listening today, or the congressman, you need to say to that congressman or representative, I want you to figure out why this isn't being taught in medical school, and who's teaching our physicians. How is that curriculum set? And then say, why isn't this really dangerous fat and disease process being taught to to physicians, so that we can change our country and get our species back to being healthy? And here's the answer. I think it's because it's the largest part of our economy. Follow the money. Nothing we spend more money on. Jeff Bezos, boring commerce, retail. Yeah, you started a big company. Do you know how much bigger healthcare is than your little Amazon? Yeah. It's the biggest part of our economy. Now, if you know somebody that can get to Elon Musk finds out about visceral fat. Elon Musk sees what's inside of his abdomen. He learns about this. He starts going to ChatGPT and he says, "Oh, I'm not as smart as I thought. This is way bigger than anybody's ever explained to me." Then you watch the world and the country change. You get a disruptive-minded person like Elon Musk to disrupt the largest part of our economy. Then we're going to see real change instead of just brick and mortar commerce like Jeff Bezos did. But I'm bullish that there's a man and woman out there that wants to disrupt the largest part of our economy and change how our species is living. And we're going to save. Think about all the money we could save, Sean. What we could do better spend money on instead of pissing it down the toilet for preventable, chronic disease.
Absolutely, can't wait to see it.
Yeah. So if you get to Elon Musk, or the other person needs here is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, he's going to go crazy if he gets an abdominal scan and sees all the fat inside of his abdomen and fat in his muscles and fat around his heart. So anyway, that's the dialogue. We got to get more people aware of these dangerous disease processes inside, just like you did.
Yeah.
And you're an early adopter. You're one of the first to do this. In fact, I'll just say this. You are the very first host of a podcast to have done this. Nobody, they've had me on, but nobody else went and got the scan. So right on,
there
man.
We go, baby.
You did that.
Let's dive into some interesting topics. So you said running is bad for you.
Indeed. So what we found in looking for visceral fat and what got rid of it was we were having a hard time getting rid of visceral fat using these strategies if somebody was a runner. And so as it turns out, distance running or distance cycling, anything you do excessively, probably has something to do with reactive oxygen species that get created when we exercise. And then through chronic exercise or durational exercise, the body tends to want to hold on to fat. And so visceral fat becomes refractory to elimination. And a good example of that is, let's take a look at a marathoner who came in and was running 8 to 10 marathons a year, substantial amount of distance running, and this is their scan. So they have this large amount of visceral fat inside of them, very small amount of fat on the outside, and that's from running 10 marathons a year, and they were only 34. And they were a vice president of a national company. And so they saw their scan, and then we showed them the large amount of fat that they had around their heart too. And they got extremely motivated. Once they saw that, they said, I am going to be your most motivated, patient. And they got rid of their visceral fat, 49% elimination of visceral fat within 3 months.
Crazy.
So distance running, distance cycling, anything like of a durational nature.
Swimming probably too.
Swimming, if you do distance swimming. So what you want to do is like sprinting. You want to do bursts of a maximum intensity exercise to really challenge yourself. And we found this basically in studying for the National Science Foundation. We noticed that animals in the wild had almost no levels of chronic disease.
Wow.
And so we said, well, let's take a look at what they eat and how they exercise. And they don't go to gyms for like 30 minutes at a time, or, an hour at a time, or an hour and a half. And now you have these bodybuilders that, are going and saying, working for 2 or 3, 4 hours a day in a gym. And so it just doesn't exist in nature. So distance running is a problem. Distance durational exercise is a problem. if you you want to eliminate chronic disease and you want to get rid of that visceral fat.
Absolutely. I saw on your YouTube also you're not a fan of probiotics.
No, I'm not. So interesting. Yeah. So I find that probiotics, they're supplements, and they're intended to have this beneficial change through the microbiome, which is we could do 10 shows on the microbiome. But what's interesting is one of the best sequencing companies out there taking a look at the different sequences, species of microbes inside your gastrointestinal tract. So if you want to get a sequence, see the type of microbes you have grown within your microbiome, after you have a bowel movement, you just swab your feces a little bit just from used toilet paper, and they can speciate the microbes inside of you. Well, They did this interesting study where it's basically been duplicated multiple times. Every client that they get sequenced and scanned, they've asked them, what type of probiotics do you take? What species of probiotics? And do you know they specifically look for those species in their microbiome, and they're never there.
Really?
They're not there. So these probiotics really don't work. Now, what does work, interesting, is fermented food. So if you eat cold, like Asia has, and many older cultures and traditional societies have a practice or a tradition of eating fermented foods. And when you eat those fermented foods, we see the persistent and legacy of these microbes persisting within the gastrointestinal tract, to include the distal tract in your rectum and when you have a bowel movement. So I have all my clients now eating fermented foods to be able to add positively to the species of microbes. So Sean, if you want to get rid of that visceral fat faster, make sure you're availing yourself of eating fermented foods. And you need to eat it more in line with how it's done in Asia. So in South Korea, they put a piece of meat in their mouth and they chew it with fermented foods together. You chew them.
So with the kimchi, they chew the meat.
You co-masticate it. So you're taking the microbes from the kimchi and putting them into the meat. Your whole life, Sean, you've put pizza and spaghetti and meat and different things in your mouth, and then you swallowed it and you've had bad microbes around your gums, and you started off with a poor, contribution into your microbiome. Today, you've learned now to start eating your meat and healthy foods with these fermented foods that have microbes in them. And now you're going to start eliminating your visceral fat that much better and go to new levels of health by really optimizing your microbiome, which is, I talk a lot about the visceral fat, but the thing that I'm most excited about actually is the microbiome.
That is interesting. How do you feel about milk and dairy?
So I think milk and dairy is super interesting, but I recommend that adults not consume milk or dairy.
Wow, no cheese.
Unless it's fermented. So fermentation, aging cheese, that's fine.
Okay.
So I do eat cheese, and I encourage my clients to eat cheese. But what I recommend, and this applies to all fermented foods, to eat them like a garnish. So don't eat fermented foods like it's a food. So what I like to say now is, there are a lot of carnivore physicians out there, Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Anthony Chafee, awesome dudes. And there's a lot of vegan physicians out there that just eat plants and fruit. And so Dr. Joel Kahn and Dr. John McDougall, lots of vegan physicians out there. Now, I'm in the middle. I eat meat and I eat vegetables, but only vegetables that are fermented, and only fruit that's been fermented to get rid of the carbohydrates. And I recommend that you eat them like a garnish. So don't eat them like foods. You eat them for their microbial benefits. So I like to say now, I advocate meat and microbes. So eating good, healthy meat, like our ancestors would go out and hunt. We were hunter-gatherers, and we'd hunt the healthiest animals, and then add in very beneficial microbes from these fermented foods in small quantities. So when it comes to dairy, I don't recommend drinking milk or having any dairy unless it's fermented. The only exception to that are infants and toddlers who are able to do that. And why are they able to do it? Because their microbiomes are different. They're little fermentation factories. So they can drink that milk and ferment it and in a very favorable way without having the harmful effect that we sometimes see. It's interesting if you there's been some connection to the consumption of dairy with MS, and I think consumption of milk with the high lactose and the carbohydrates probably have a contribution to it. And there's a lot of confounders involved in it. I think we have to look at many more studies and conduct better design studies to actually elucidate that. But I think carbohydrates and the sugars are changing our microbiome, and probably that changing microbiome is responsible for the sad state that our species have gotten to. Homo sapiens today have the highest amount of chronic disease that we've ever had in our existence.
Wow.
And so there's never been the degree of disease that we currently have. And I'll just say, I'll stay away from that. I'll just say this: that is a joke compared to a real pathogenic epidemic that could come out and wipe people out. And your best chance for surviving something like a Spanish flu that ran through the world around 1917 is to have the healthiest body possible. Like I said earlier, your most important physical asset is your body. And so you really want to make sure that your body is in the best condition possible to fight off disease. And your microbiome is a great way to view those different species of microbes that live inside of you as your allies to help promote your health.
Any other biohacking things you do to help with your health? I know we were talking about sunlight yesterday.
Yeah, so sunshine is really important. So sunshine through the microbiome. A lot of people just think of the microbiome being inside of your gut, but your microbiome is on your skin. And so these microbes are on your skin, and they literally dictate and influence the amount of vitamin D that your body will biosynthesize based on the species of microbes on your skin. Now, if you're washing always with soap and you're using chlorinated water, you're going to dramatically impact those microbes on your skin. And so many important substances like vitamin D and testosterone come through the influence of sunshine. And so I recommend a biohack is sunbathing. I mean, really sunning yourself in the nude, allowing sunshine to get onto your perineum, onto your scrotum if you're a guy, to maintain healthy levels of testosterone. So sunshine is awesome. And the influencers are out there are having us terrified about eating meat, natural meat. They have us terrified about sunshine that, predated the existence of Homo sapiens by probably 1 billion years. So way, way longer than we've been around. And then water. So I get kind of controversial, but I predict they're gonna come out and say the next thing besides meat, you got to eat this laboratory made meat. They're going to tell us is we can't eat meat anymore. They're going to come out and say you can't drink this stuff called water. It's what you want to do is like make this laboratory liquid substance. We've created this new beverage. So get back to nature. Sunshine, water, wholesome, clean water, good healthy meat. Good, healthy vegetables and fruits that have been fermented to eliminate the carbohydrates and some of the anti-nutrients and microtoxins that oxalates and lectins that are present in these. I think fruits and vegetables play a role for their medicinal value. They do have some nutritional value, but I have cut way back on the consumption of them to just in fermented food as a garnish. But the biohack of sunshine is really important. A sauna is really important. In fact, I have a little list of little strategies that I recommend people to take, and I'll put it up there so that you can follow that and take a screenshot of it. But you want to also, I believe in stress hormetics. So chaperone proteins are created when you go into a sauna, and you can significantly reduce in a dose-dependent manner how much atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease you'll have and you're at risk for if you use a sauna 4 to 7 times a week, as opposed to just doing it 1 to 2 times a week. And the same, those shock proteins, those chaperone proteins, also get created when you go into cold water. So I was just recently saw that one of your guests, Lane Norton, was talking about, and Lane's a bright guy. Shout out to Lane. Lane, mad respect for you. You're very intelligent. But here's what I'd recommend. Get an MRI. Listen, I'll look at you and everybody else. I don't really care what's going on in 7.9 billion people. And if you're listening to me today, whoever you are, the only study you need is a study of one inside you. It doesn't matter if the rest of the human race is doing something different. You may be different. So get an MRI and see what's going on with your muscle and see if it's shrinking, going away when you're going into a cold plunge, or if it's actually increasing. Now, there may be other things responsible like stress, alcohol, poor sleep, eating processed foods, a variety of other things. But the point that I like to make to everybody when it comes to utilizing MRIs and biohacks is follow your own study. Be the N of one, like Sean did. Sean was a biological last night. He went and got an MRI. Now he sees where he's at baseline. Then he can make some informed choices. And that's what, if you're listening today to the podcast, that's what you should be doing. Making informed choices, see what's going on inside of your body, and get that scan.
Absolutely. Dr. Sean, it's been really enlightening. I can't wait to take this journey with you. Where can people consult with you and get scans from you and everything?
Yeah. So just on this sheet here, I have all my contacts for social media. I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube. And so you can follow me, and you can also go to my website, just my name, Dr. Sean O'Mara, DrSeanomara. And I also have a book. I do shout out a little electronic book that you can get if you want to read. It's a good read, short read, it's an easy read to help you move ahead and find out. So that's a quick investment. But yeah, if you're very motivated, you're interested, I have coaches and specialists that work in my practice to help you. And we're always looking for people that want to eradicate disease like yourself and to share these interesting insights.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on, man. That was fun.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me, Sean.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching, guys. Get an MRI. See you guys tomorrow.